What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Stihl trimmer, and the problem is that in a previous video we serviced the carburetor to get it working after being unused for years, but unfortunately it stopped working again. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this trimmer. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. In a previous video, we went through the carburetor and was able to get it started and running pretty well. I was planning on thoroughly testing it a few days later, but when I tried to start it, it was really tough to start. After getting it running, it started to have running issues until it finally died. After that, I couldn't get it started again. I did some testing only to find out the carburetor was the problem yet again. Now before I get started fixing it, I'll put some fuel into the tank and show you what it's doing. That way you can see if it's the same problem you're having. As you can see, it didn't even try and start. Now this trimmer was put up with fuel in the tank for years, so I want to check the fuel filter for any problems. The reason it wasn't looked at before was because the primer bulb was filling with fuel, so it wasn't a major concern. But now we're going to have to be a bit more thorough. Now what I'm seeing is that the fuel line has become super soft and the filter has old gummy fuel covering it. It's probably this gummy stuff that's clogged the carburetor, the fuel lines, and the filter, so I'll need to replace all of these and see if we can get it running yet again. Now normally we wouldn't have to go to this extent of replacing the carburetor, the fuel lines, and the filter, but this trimmer was so badly stored that this is the situation we're left with. I'm going to start by removing the filter base, the engine cover, followed by the carburetor itself. After that, I'll remove and replace the fuel lines. The part of the fuel lines that were out of the tank seems okay, but the part that was inside the tank has become super soft. This is what happens when the lines are in contact with ethanol gas for long periods of time. Now, since the original fuel lines were black, I will replace it with black lines instead of using the yellow Tygon line. Now, you can decide which line has the fuel filter on it, but I'm going to keep it the way it was, with the line towards the shaft, the filter line, and the other line will be the return line. Pull the fuel line out of the tank and cut the angle piece off. This is going to be our filter line. Make sure there's plenty of line for the filter to reach all the fuel in the tank. After that, cut the return line at an angle and insert it into the other tank grommet. I'm not going to cut the line to length yet, so that's why I'm using the other end of the same fuel line. So here's the new carburetor. It's a cheap, non-original part, but they've always worked for me in the past, so I'm going to go with it again. Now before we install it, I'm going to look over it to make sure that the fuel lines are the same and that the throttle cable connects the same way. The only difference I see, which happens to be a good one, is that instead of just one fuel adjustment screw like the original, I now have two. This will give me more precise control when I'm tuning it. Now slide the new carburetor on the engine studs and cut the fuel lines to length. Remember that the filter line goes on the lower port and the return line goes to the top port. Before I go any further, I want to press the primer bulb to make sure that it is priming. If yours isn't, you might want to make sure you have enough fuel in the tank first. After that, reconnect the throttle cable to the carburetor and check that the throttle is moving like it's supposed to. Then reinstall the filter base and the filter. Now before I finish the rest of the installation, it's at this point we can try and start the trimmer just to make sure things are working before we commit to putting everything back. Now the idle was a bit high for me, so I turned it down just a little bit. The base tune from the factory was fine, but I like to run my engine with a little bit more fuel, so I turned out both the L and the H screws counterclockwise a bit. If you add too much fuel, the engine will die, so you might have to turn the idle screw in so it doesn't die on you. Now it's mostly tuned, but I will need to tune it again when it cools down for a cold start. I'll do a thorough test with it before I mow next time. I'll keep the screwdriver with me, that way I can adjust it as I'm trimming. Then I'm going to let it cool down once again and make sure that it cold starts one more time. Now another reason why your trimmer may stop working after you get it running is that the fuel filter may have fallen off in the tank. Now once this happens, the inlet screen inside the carburetor will clog up and stop the engine. To fix this, you're going to need to replace the fuel lines and then clean out the carburetor. So my question is, would you try to go through the carburetor again and get it working, or would you just save the time and replace the carburetor instead like I did? I know what my opinion is, but I'd like to hear what yours is. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.